Yes, the thing I have to say isn't relative to the evidence that was spoken of, but it's relative to the film that Nova showed. And I haven't heard anybody mention it, except that I thought I saw it at least. Let's put it that way. What I'm talking about is when they showed they repeated that about three times, I think, during the film. Three different areas, views of the book tower, the grassy knoll, and the fence and everything,
right.
And the sign and the shooting. I could swear that I saw trajectory lines, like bullet trajectory lines. Now, with the speed of the frames going across, the film frames and whatnot, it looked like dotted lines of a different color or a different shade in the film.
Let's understand, you're not talking about the computer-assisted graphics that Nova used.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. If that was actually put in the film or if it was something that was really there that I saw.
Now, no tracer bullets were used. The tracer is a special kind of bullet.
It wasn't necessarily a tracer, just maybe a reflection, because the speed of the film, the speed of the lens, everything might have picked that up. Because I know, I have known in the past in shooting that real rifle experts, people who can, shoot a hole out of a washer, pitched out and things like that, they get to where they can actually see the trajectory. Even though you can't see the actual bullet, you can see the trajectory like a shadow with your eyes. They shoot with no sights or anything, and because they can see the trajectory, they can be very accurate.
Well, I didn't see what you saw.
I thought I saw something in that film.
How about you, Dr. Kaiser? Did you see it?
I didn't.
No, I didn't see it either.
The book building window down, and also from the other direction.
From the grassy knoll?
Yes.
I'll look for it on the tape if I can find it. Appreciate your call, sir.
There were about 3 times that it was repeated.
Okay, I'll look for it.
Okay.
Can't settle it now. More in a moment on WXYT. Liz was looked into the JFK assassination as a professional expert, and Dr. David Kaiser, historian from Carnegie-Mellon University, talking about the JFK assassination. The FBI knew about Oswald's presence in Dallas and didn't notify the Secret Service. Anybody, either one of you, with an idea as to why? It looms seemingly large right now. What's that about? Dr. Kaiser, why don't you tackle that one?
I'm not really qualified to answer that. I suspect it was an oversight of some kind, but I don't know exactly what the standard operating procedures for FBI officers were on things like that.
They had him pretty tightly surveilled. Apparently they took pictures of what they thought was him, and this is also mysterious.
In Mexico?
In Mexico, yeah, and it's not.
Well, that was not, but the target of that was not Lee Harvey Oswald. The target of that was anybody who went in and out of the Cuban or Soviet embassies. What I'm saying is, I believe that the FBI has a responsibility to keep Secret Service and local police informed of people they consider suspicious or dangerous. Now, the FBI knew that Oswald was in Dallas, and in fact, they were in a sort of a minor confrontation with Oswald, which they covered up. And this is one of the disturbing things I just reread, actually, this morning in the Warren Commission, that Oswald had been to the office and said, "Stop bugging me and my wife," and left a note for an agent, and they just threw the note away after Oswald was killed. But maybe Oswald didn't fall into the category of the sort of person they thought they had to tell the Secret Service about.
Well, you're bending over real far, it seems to me. And maybe that's an overcharacterization, but look at it from a different perspective. Here you've got a guy who is a former defector, a former self-styled fair play for Cuba person who was engaged in confrontations with others on the streets of New Orleans, a man who has a very, very disturbing background seen just on the surface of it, working in a building on the route of the presidential motorcade, unchallenged, windows open, a couple of windows open at the time of the assassination. It seems nuts just on the surface.
David, it depends on how that office processes this kind of information. I don't know, actually, whether they knew he was working at the depository. I also don't know if they were accustomed to run that kind of a check, which would be a very complex process. I mean, you have presumably some sort of alphabetical list of subversives.
Well, maybe it's
different kinds.
Sure.
And are you really going to take the time to cross-check that with the whole route of the motorcade and check home addresses and check office addresses and figure out where everybody is.
Well, maybe it's not as complicated as that. You're the Secret Service advance man, so to speak,
yes.
and you're securing the route of the presidential motorcade, whatever time lag you have in advance to do it.
Yeah.
You walk into places along the way and you ask, who's this guy, who's this guy, who's this guy, what's his job, what's his title, name, cross-check, call the office. Lee Harvey Oswald, hey, talk to that guy. Lee Harvey Oswald works in the depository. This is the hypothetical scenario.
Yeah, right.
Working in the deposit, that's right where the motorcade will be turning. Get that guy out of there. Secret Service conversation with the FBI, et cetera, et cetera. What's so ridiculous about that?
Well, nothing necessarily, but what I'm trying to get across to you is this is a historical question. The question is, what were the procedures?
Well, yeah, but it's
normally and in this case. And that would be a very interesting thing to know, and it may be that is buried somewhere.
Yeah.
Warren Commission documents or somewhere else.
After all, it's not all that long ago. It's only 25 years ago, which is not a great deal of time. Many assassinations, a number of assassinations had already occurred, and one fairly recently in time, the attempted assassination of Truman.
That's right.
In 1950, not to mention numerous others going back over a century and more. So it's not outside. In other words, we were not a pristine assassination-free nation up until 1963. There was a great deal to give concern, not the least of which the assault on Adlai Stevenson just a month or two before, in the very same city by right-wing extremists on the streets of Dallas.
That's right.
All right. We got to pause again. Our number is 559-1270. We'll have more in a moment on WXYT. Mission with Dr. Werner Spitz, the noted forensic pathologist, and historian David Kaiser of Carnegie-Mellon University. Here's Jerry from Metamora. Jerry, thanks for being patient.
You're welcome.
Hi, Jerry.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I don't really think that we're ever going to know what exactly happened on that day in 1963. There's just too many unanswered questions. But a couple of points that I would like to make, because I've had some firsthand experience with weapons and being a former Marine in Vietnam. I've seen some things happen that certainly lead one to have to kind of walk the fence on these two different scenarios or theories. One thing for sure, Oswald was an exceptional person. I think that he was a guy that had a mission, and because he had a mission with his Marine experience, being an expert rifleman.
No, he wasn't an expert rifleman. That's a very important point. He did not fire even a sharpshooter. He fired marksman.
It was marksman.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
I stand corrected. Okay. Anyways.
This is a point for the conspiracy side, supposedly. But anyway.
Anyways, I believe he was a man with a mission. Well, I guess we'll never find that out. But for people to say that it was physically impossible for him to chamber 2 rounds in a bolt-action rifle and get more than one shot off, I don't believe that.
3 rounds, if we include a bullet which apparently, according to the Warren Commission's initial understanding, didn't hit anything.
Didn't hit anything.
Right.
Okay. I look at a guy like Spud Webb from the Atlanta Falcons, a little short guy like that. A lot of people would say it's physically impossible for him to dunk a basketball.
Right, the old bumblebee scenario. Wind loading is too high for it to fly.
Right. If Oswald wanted to do it, I think he could, to be quite honest with you. Another thing that kind of disturbs me about the one-shot theory is that I've seen people wounded. I've seen people get hit with an M16, and an M16, the bullet upon contact is supposed to make a hole not much bigger than a pencil around.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to have a tumbling effect once it hits,
right.
And the hole coming out is supposed to be much larger, okay? That's ideally what's supposed to happen. And
right.
I can remember a particular incident where a North Vietnamese regular was shot at approximately 40 to 50 feet distance on a downhill grade, and the fellow was hit in the left upper corner of the head. The bullet went in no more than about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, made a 90-degree right-hand turn, and exited, and left 2 small pencil holes, and the guy was alive. According to the people that designed the bullet and the gun, that should have never happened.
Right.
Okay, but it did.
Okay.
I've seen a number of things happen like that with wounds. So to say that one bullet could not have done all that damage, I don't know. But
that's a very good point. By indirection, a very good point. That real life circumstances can confound any predictive theory of the behavior of a projectile. Good point.
One last point about Governor Connolly. Someone called earlier, and they said that something about him holding a hat and possibly he should have been wounded in the wrist or something like that. I didn't catch the whole thing.
Wounded in the wrist.
Okay. I know myself, I was wounded in Vietnam, and I have 3 pieces of shrapnel still on my chest, so this was a deep wound that I had received. I carried 3 Marines and an Arvin regular to a helicopter about 150 to 200 meters away from where I was wounded. I was moving and going for at least 15 minutes before I actually realized that I had 3 holes in my chest.
You didn't even know you were hit.
Even though I was hit. And the only way
And that's a larger round, probably, than an M16 round, if we're talking about what they typically use, to 7.62.
Okay, I was wounded by a grenade.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And nonetheless, though, I had 3 holes, and I didn't know I was wounded until I felt something running down my side, a warm something which was blood. And up to that point, I'd been moving these guys all over the place trying to get everybody out of that area.
I think you've just documented what Dr. Spitz was saying an hour or so ago. Wouldn't you say, Doctor?
Yes, that's right. The person that's hit is the last one to ask whether he was hit or not.
Depending on where they were hit, depending on the circumstances. Sure. Appreciate your call, sir. Very good.
Thank you.
Good stuff. More in a moment on WXYT. Here, and we're coming up to weather time, talking about the JFK assassination with 2 expert guests. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Werner Spitz, recently retired, but even more active now than when working for Wayne County. And Dr. David Kaiser of Carnegie-Mellon University, historian, quoted in today's New York Times as one of the, I guess, skeptics about the official account and pointing perhaps toward a mafia involvement. We'll talk more with him in just a moment after weather coming up. We've been with Doctors David Kaiser and Werner Spitz talking about the JFK assassination. Let's talk to Dale from Livonia on WXYT. Dale?
Good afternoon, John.
Hi, Dale.
David, I've got a comment regarding the Oswald shooting and then a question for Dr. Spitz.
Sure.
Regarding the Oswald shooting, I've done 15 years of analysis of the assassination. In fact, I wrote an article that'll appear in Detroit News next Tuesday.
I'll look for it.
Despite all of the connections of Jack Ruby to organized crime, I find it inconceivable that he was motivated to shoot Oswald through an organized crime connection. Basically, based on the way that he entered the basement. For instance, at 11:15, they moved Oswald and brought him down from the 3rd floor to the basement. He was then shot at 11:21. So he left the 3rd floor at 11:15. There have been quite a few books that have alleged that Ruby was tipped off by some inside police conspirators to the exact time of the transfer. Yet, if Oswald left the 3rd floor at 11:15, was on his way down for the transfer, it's a fact that Jack Ruby was almost a block away at the Western Union office, standing in a line to send a money order, which wasn't sent or stamped until 11:17. So, in fact, if Oswald was being moved at 11:15, in other words, the transfer was beginning,
right,
why would Ruby, if he was in a position to receive a tip, which I find inconceivable since he was standing in line, why would he then stand in line an additional 2 minutes and possibly miss his final opportunity to shoot Oswald?
It makes perfect sense to me if your timetable is accurate. Makes
Exactly.
perfect sense to me. It's a target of opportunity, apparently. Dr. Kaiser, you're going to say?
Well, this is a kind of argument from plausibility, which is used in all kinds of fields of history, and which does not impress me that much. What you are assuming is that, the gist of the argument, as I see it, is that if we're assuming that Ruby is acting on orders, then we also have to assume that he can't possibly make a mistake, that he can't possibly be sloppy, that he can't possibly be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't see any, even assuming that the account is absolutely correct, which I will assume for the moment, and none of that has to be true.
You see, plausibility is another way of saying probabilities. Which is the more probable scenario?
No, it is not, because it's only another way of saying probability if you think that people act perfectly based on available information.
Now, to put it in a more extreme form, that knock on your door may be Queen Elizabeth and her entire royal retinue, but the probability is that they're not. Now, that it's someone else, someone more likely to be knocking at your door. That it seems to me is the more balanced way to figure out why Ruby did what he did. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't see what the analogy would be in the way that you stated it with Ruby's behavior. No.
But the point, David, is that according to the organized crime implication that they motivated Ruby to silence Oswald, allegedly this is Ruby's last attempt or last chance to silence Oswald. Why would he then be standing in a line at 11:17, 2 minutes after Oswald's already on his way down to the basement, when in fact this is his last opportunity? Now, allegedly, the motive would be organized crime tells Ruby, listen, you're going to silence Oswald. If you don't, we're going to kill you. Yeah. So allegedly he's acting under threat of death, yet he waits an additional 2 minutes and, for all intents and purposes, is not in a position to receive a tip from his police conspirators that, in fact, a transfer has begun.
Maybe he got a tip. I mean, this is all maybes, but I don't see that your maybes are any better than mine. This is my point. Maybe he got a tip from somebody in the police department, and we know we had a lot of friends.
All of which presumes...
At 11, and they said it won't be until 11:30, Jack. And maybe he was just lucky.
But that presumes an equality of plausibilities that I don't see for the reasons I've earlier cited. I thought it much more persuasive that Ruby did it on his own for reasons which were intrinsic, not extrinsic.
When did he decide to do it, according to your hypothesis?
Well, sometime over the weekend. I don't know exactly when the plan was forged.
It seems to me just as crazy for him to go take the money order. If he's determined to make things easy for Jacqueline Kennedy, why is he going to take any chance on being away at the proper time?
Well, because he's a hanger-on, and of course the festering idea may suddenly acquire force and weight and physical impact when confronted with the presence of the man himself.
Well, it is possible.
He was always armed. We know that.
It is possible.
Okay.
The question that I had for Dr. Spitz, David, was regards to the JFK back wound.
Yes.
According to the House Select Committee, their photographic panel determined that in analyzing the Zapruder film, that the shot, or the single bullet that struck the president, occurred at approximately frame 196, immediately before they went behind the sign, within a few frames. At that point, the view from the sixth floor window to the president's car was blocked by a tree that lines Elm Street. Now, from what I understand, and Dr. Spitz, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong based on your analysis, the medical evidence indicates that the bullet that struck the president was not wobbling, was not tumbling. In other words, it had not hit anything prior to hitting the president in the back. If that's true, then do you think, what's your comment regarding a bullet passing through a tree and then striking a president, and understanding, of course, that it was a windy day in Dallas that day? What are the chances that a bullet would pass through a tree, miss all the branches, and then strike the president?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that other than to say that the wound in the back of the shoulder or in the back looked like any other entrance bullet wound. And I cannot imagine if a bullet like that would hit some little thin branches that it would be deviated off its course or in any way changed in appearance. I doubt very much that it would have hit anything but leaves and thin branches, if that. But really, the bottom line is that the wound in the skin looked like any other bullet wound, like you'd expect.
Okay, thanks to our caller. Thank you, sir. Interesting stuff. Got to pause again, Dr. Kaiser. Let me ask you a question before we do.
Sure.
It's been argued.
I have another question for Dr. Spitz. I hope we can get it in before the hour.
Sure, we'll ask it as soon as we come back from the commercial. But before we do, I guess one of the big arguments against Oswald operating as a hitman for the KGB has been that he's so volatile, so strange, so uncontrollable, so weird, and so hard to hold to any kind of coherent plan. You know, he's just the wrong kind of guy psychologically. The KGB would never use him. There's a mini version of that goes to the Ruby scenario and the organized crime scenario, which is organized crime would never use a guy like Ruby because he's too volatile, too flaky, too hard to control. What do you do with him?
Well, then if you're using the organized crime scenario, you have to also ask, why they use somebody like Oswald. And Blakey's very interesting on that, too, in the plot to kill the president. Basically, obviously, for either job, they have to use somebody who isn't too obvious. And there is some precedent for this. Now, Ruby actually is too obvious, but, actually, David, I think one of the most fascinating things about it is how willing most of us were to believe the official explanation. And by that, I mean that even if it's true, I mean, my God, if you wanted to design two more suspicious people than Oswald and Ruby, it would be very difficult to do it.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what you're saying by that.
Well, what I'm saying is that it's another point. Well, what I'm saying is I think it's interesting that there was a kind of what am I looking for? A national tendency to believe that this was just one nut and then another nut who shot the first one.
Right.
And that had to be pretty powerful to become the consensus so fast, even though it could be true. I'm not saying it couldn't be. So I guess that is the answer I would give to your question.
Well, yeah, that's...
And Ruby, you see, there's other evidence. As I said, Ruby was at Parkland Hospital. Ruby, according to one account from Dallas police officers, I think on Friday night, tried to enter the room where Oswald was being interrogated.
Mm-hmm.
So he was up to something.
Okay, well, we'll have more of this in just a moment. We'll ask your question of Dr. Spitz when we come back from this break. Is there forensic pathologist Dr. Werner Spitz talking about the JFK assassination? Your question, Dr. Kaiser.
Yes. Dr. Spitz, I think you probably know that one reason there was so much controversy over the autopsy and its results was that on the afternoon of the 22nd, the presidential party insisted on taking the president's body back to Washington in defiance, really, of local law and local procedures.
Yeah, that was a big mistake.
Yes. To tell you the truth, I was really going to put you on the spot. Since you were a former medical examiner yourself, and ask you how you would have handled that situation if this had been in Detroit.
Well, I don't know that I could have handled it any differently because
you wouldn't have had the authority.
Well, Dr. Rose had plenty of authority. He was a medical examiner in Dallas.
Yes.
The FBI or CIA or whoever they were pushed him out of the way and told him to go and mind his own business.
Yeah.
And so Commander Hume became the man on the spot?
And so they took the body and shipped it to Bethesda from Dallas.
Right.
And once in Bethesda, it was in the Naval Hospital that they did the autopsy by Navy personnel.
Without training
and experience with this kind of autopsy.
With no training in forensic pathology. They were pathologists, but not forensic pathologists.
That's correct.
All right, we got to pause again. We'll have more in a moment on WXYT. Assassination Doctors Kaiser and Spitz. Let's not waste time with further identifications. John from Detroit on WXYT. John.
Good afternoon, Dave, and again.
Hi, John.
I've got a question. Okay, was Oswald's body ever exhumed and, researched?
I think it was.
Because the reason I asked this question because about 3 or 4 years ago on Channel 9 in Detroit, which is Canadian, they showed a British documentary on the Kennedy assassination, and they compared Oswald's Marine discharge papers with the autopsy report. Now, there was a 2-inch difference in height. The eye color was different. There was a 30-pound weight difference. And one of the bodies, I forget which one, had a broken bone, an old fracture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's true there are discrepancies in the records of Oswald as opposed to the man who was arrested. There's no doubt about it.
This leads me to the supposition. Oswald went to Russia, but did Oswald come back?
I think, in fact, I don't remember the details, but I believe that a British researcher actually got an exhumation order, and they checked that out and concluded that it was the same person.
Okay, now this caller, Mel from Westland on WXYT. Mel?
Yes, I was wondering why they don't question Mrs. Kennedy herself, Jackie Onassis, and why they don't question Onassis himself. It seems to me that her, as a person, would be pretty well upset with his Playboy activities while he was in the White House.
Yeah, and where does Aristotle Onassis come into it?
Yeah.
Where? I'm asking you.
Well, I'm saying, I think that it wasn't a short time that she got married to him.
How long? I don't
about
remember.
A year and a half.
No, 5 years.
Yeah.
Sorry, caller.
I don't think it leads to much, in all honesty. And since time draws short, why don't we get kind of final, well, not final, obviously, but closing analyses from each of you. Starting with you, Dr. Spitz, what's your best understanding of what happened November 22nd, 1963?
Well, it is my belief that the president was shot from the back, that 2 bullets hit him, 1 hit the shoulder, continued into Connolly, and for some mysterious reason, the slug was found not where it's supposed to have been. The second shot hit the head. Both shots came from the back. And I can understand how all this grew over the years, grew and grew because of people's misconceptions based on unfortunate findings released after the autopsy and
incompetence, confusion.
I don't want to call it incompetence, but I want to say that we never hear about the autopsy of Robert Kennedy that was done by a forensic pathologist. There's never any question about what transpired in Los Angeles on that day.
Dr. Kaiser, you got the last word.
Yes, I don't disagree with anything that Dr. Spitz just said. I think that...
30 seconds, by the way.
Okay. We're probably not going to know much more than we ever do. It's a fascinating story. The biggest thing that you learn as you look into it, and particularly the politics surrounding the investigation, is that it just isn't a normal homicide when the President of the United States is killed.
Okay. I wish we had more time.
Okay.
Got to leave it there. Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. Thank you, Dr. Spitz.
You're welcome.
Dr. Portner, afternoons.